oftentimes the public perception of an artist will do them a disservice, particularly if they were a versatile artist. Take Frank Zappa, for example. The man did doo-wop, jazz, hard rock, avant-garde, modern, classical electronica? But to talk to the average person, you would think he was just a 1970s version of Weird Al. And Zappa is by no means the only artist to be mischaracterized in this way by public memory. There are many others. But one of the ones that comes to mind most readily would have to be Todd Rundgren. If you're like most people, you remember Todd Rundgren for songs like this. And this. Or maybe even this. And yes, that last one was an XTC song, but he produced that album and was heavily involved in the creative process. What isn't talked about or remembered as much is the other stuff that Todd Rundgren did. Stuff that was wild, adventurous, and sometimes just plain weird. Rundgren's first two albums are pretty much just normal Carole King-esque early 70s ballady singer-songwriter music. But on 1972's Something Anything, a double album, he started to experiment with longer song lengths and different song structures. And on the follow-up, 1973's A Wizard, a True Star, he went wild, creating an entire suite of otherwise unconnected songs that flow together on the first side, while the B-side is more commercial but still pretty good. And on 1974's Todd, he pushed the boundaries even further with an ambitious double album that is not as good as A Wizard, a True Star, but still has some good songs on there. And in 1975, he made the album we're going to talk about today, Initiation. Initiation was by far the most ambitious Rundgren album to date, featuring 6 songs on side 1 and one 35-minute song on side 2. And it was 68 minutes long. At that time, the longest single-disc vinyl record ever, and actually longer than Rundgren's previous double album. Now, for those who don't know, the reason most albums during the vinyl era were 45 to 46 minutes long is that that's actually about as much music as you can fit onto a single vinyl record without starting to seriously compromise the sound quality. In fact, the original vinyl issues of this album specifically warned against playing it with a bad needle and actually advocated taping the album and listening to it that way. And like many albums on this list, Initiation was critically panned and labeled a bridge too far by most reviewers. As I feel like I'm reciting like a broken record in all of these videos, we're going to go back and reevaluate it today. So right off the bat, we have the hit, the one song from this album that a casual fan might remember, and it's fantastic. A surprisingly intricate little pop song that is slathered in some absolutely wonderful production. This, I'm not much of a fan of. In fact, I would probably say this is the worst thing on the album. Basically, it's synthesized a cappella, and not particularly inventive a cappella at that. But this I like much more. It's much heavier and more aggressive, reminiscent of some of the harder rocking songs on Something Anything or Wizard of True Star. The lyrics are interesting too and almost sort of predict the rejection of art rock and embracing of punk and new wave by rock critics just a few years after this album's release. Eastern Intrigue is a song that I can't decide whether I like or not, because there are parts of it that are quite hit or miss, like this part. Yeah, that's not racist at all. And then it keeps reminding me of other bands, like, why does this part remind me of Asia-era Steely Dan? And this reminds me of Gentle Giant. But I will say, the one thing that saves this song is an absolutely fantastic lyric. Just listen.
On my knees, one question please. For the real God, please. For the real God, please. For the real God, please.
Of the shorter songs that make up the first side of this album, the title track is by far my favorite. It's definitely got a disco beat, but it's also very much an art rock song with very odd, mystical, cosmic lyrics and some fantastic instrumental breaks too. And then when the guitar sets in, and all in all, the song is fantastic. Definitely a favorite from this album, and possibly an overall career favorite as well. Fair Warning ends side 1, and is it just me, or does this opening remind anyone else of the beginning of Funkadelic's Maggot Brain? Am I the only one? I guess I am. In any case, after the weird metaphysical spoken word section, the song itself is mostly just a ridiculously overblown ballad with lyrics that are interesting and kind of pretentious at the same time. You know, this is one of those art rock songs that is good, but could also very easily be rewritten to be about the end of a relationship. I mean, who knows? Maybe it is about the end of a relationship and I'm just analyzing it wrong. In any case, I do like the little reprise of Real Man at the end of the song. A Treatise on Cosmic Fire is the main attraction of Initiation. 35 minutes long, taking up the entirety of side 2. What you think of this album pretty much entirely depends on what you think of A Treatise on Cosmic Fire. Me, I love this song. It opens up with some weird ambient synth tones before moving into a sort of chilled out, vaguely jazzy guitar-filled passage, which really reminds me of some of the instrumental stuff on the Alan Parsons Project's I, Robot album, and that bit lasts for a good minute or two, and then after that ends, you get several minutes of synthy gurglings with a cool, cheesy 70s sci-fi vibe, before it eventually starts picking up steam again, going for some almost like an introduction to something epic. And then you get into something that sounds like a really circusy bit, or the background synths to one of his contemporary ballads. I can't decide. After that the song goes nuts, unleashing waves of processed synthetic noise upon your ears, shredding your brain molecules and melting you down to the basic constituent atoms of your being. And by the way, have I mentioned that there's still 10 minutes left in the song? So after that ends, we get some more quiet bits, and then the song does this. I'm not really sure how to describe that, but whatever it is, it's amazing. Actually, that could describe a lot of this song, to be honest. Anyway, after that little bit of synthesized madness, we go back to some more quiet parts that slowly build up until finally we end the song with a reprise of the initial guitar-heavy bit. This album is awesome. Now, I will say that this is an album of two halves, and like a lot of albums of two halves, what you think about the second half pretty much decides what you think about the album as a whole. As I said, I love A Treatise on Cosmic Fire, and most of the songs on the first side, although I'm not the biggest fan of Born to Synthesize or The Death of Rock and Roll. But generally, I can overlook those two tracks. As with most projects associated with Todd Rundgren, the production on this album is fantastic. The album came out in '75, but it sounds like stuff that came out in 1977 and '78. At the end of the day, I love this album, but I do get why someone else might not like it, because it is such prime, sort of mid to late 70s excess, but to me that's half the fun of it. A lot of Todd Rundgren's more ambitious albums just sound like a guy going into the studio and having the time of his life, exploring all of the sounds and textures he could create with the equipment. And the kind of music fan that I am, I like stuff like that. But if you don't, I totally understand it. This kind of stuff isn't for everyone. So anyway, that was Initiation. I highly recommend it to the open-minded, and I will see you next time with something totally different.